Welcome. Emotions are everywhere. So how can we be smarter with our feelings? The answer is emotional intelligence, or EQ. We're delighted you're watching, because at 6 seconds, we're working towards 1 billion people practicing the skills of emotional intelligence. Can we count you in? Here on 6 Seconds channel, you'll find practical skills for work and life, inspiration for today, and support to build a better future for all.
Welcome to our weekly live EQ show. We go live every week on Tuesday, 8 a.m. Pacific time. If you're new to us, we are an emotional intelligence network organization. We're a global company, and we would love to talk to you. And we have actually a session that's called Welcome to EQ that we do several times a week. The first time is going to be this week on Thursday. So you can just go on events.6seconds.org and search for welcome, and you will find a lot of options if you want to know more about emotional intelligence and our approach to EQ. So every week we pick a topic that we are gonna talk about and discuss with some panelists and our moderator to really see what are some applications of emotional intelligence. And this week we're gonna talk about parenting in transition. I'm sure a lot of you who have kids or who have friends that have kids know how these last few months have been a whirlwind of change as far as how we interact with kids at home, and the school environment has changed completely, and there is a lot happening. On top of the other transitions that parents and children go through as part of the growth of the relationship. So I'm really excited to hear more about this topic from our panelists today. And I want to start by introducing our CEO and moderator of the day, Joshua Friedman.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us here in the live stream. Whether you're here live or watching later, we are very glad to have you. And if you are here live, I see some of you have already started to type into the chat. Let us know your name and where you're coming in from. And we'd also love to have your questions today as you think about your own parenting or people that you are interacting with and the challenges they're facing. I'm finding for myself as a parent this time to be pretty complicated. My kids are now 19 and 21, and they're both pretty far away. One's very far away in New Zealand. And maintaining connection and supporting them, but also recognizing that we're in this place of deep uncertainty. And there's so many things where I would like to be able to say to them, yeah, I know what's happening here. I can give you some support for that. And the truth is, what I can say is, yeah, it's complicated. I don't know. And that's not a super fun place to be as a parent. So today we have a wonderful group of panelists from parents of kids of different ages and stages and places in the world, and we're going to get to talk about parenting and these transitions that we're in. So before I ask the panelists to introduce themselves, I just mentioned this word transition. William Bridges wrote about transitions and change. And in our work on change, I've written a lot about this in organizations. I think I wrote a little bit about it in the Wholehearted Parenting book that I wrote. But the notion is that the change is the practical thing. We're going to school on Thursday. Well, on Friday, we've been to school, and that's it. But the transition is often much longer. And often long before the change, the transition begins, and we start to process and experiment and have feelings about it. And then often long after the change. And so when our kids are in this place of transition, they're trying to find their way and figure out what's going on. So that can create a lot of tumultuousness for them and therefore for us. So panelists, what do we do? Let's start with what not to do. Would you please each introduce yourselves and tell us one terrible piece of parenting advice that you've heard that maybe led you to say, I need to learn something different. Mei K, can we start with you?
Sure. Thank you so much, Josh, for letting me be here. I'm really happy to join. First of all, my name is Mei and I am coming all the way from Egypt. I'm a psychologist, and I'm also a certified positive discipline parenting educator and also a positive discipline early childhood educator. I also wear a completely different hat. I'm a social entrepreneur, so I have an ethical fashion brand that promotes social and environmental issues. And most importantly, I think the most important role I have is being the mother of a 4-year-old, which is, comes with its challenges. And, she's great, but yeah, like we've been saying, it's definitely difficult during this time. Let's see, the worst piece of advice I got, I think there's a lot, but the worst one I got, I think, which I still continue to get, is this comment that she's so attached to you. Why does she always want to be with you? Why does she always want to hang around? Why is she always following you around? She's just too attached. You have to work on getting her to detach from you. So yeah, that, given my positive discipline background, yeah, it definitely doesn't sit well.
As the parent of teenagers, I can promise that will not last.
Yes, I heard that. I'm trying to enjoy it while I can.
Gerald, how about you? What's the worst piece of parenting advice you've got?
Sure. So I'm Gerald Bush with GBKB Consulting, and I'm a EQ certified coach through 6 Seconds. And I'm excited to be here as well. And thanks, Josh, for the invite. And I think for me, I'm a parent. First of all, I have 3 kids, a 23-year-old daughter who's out of the house, and I have a 14-year-old son. So you can imagine how that feels in a house where there is a lot of structure, and then they are locked in with me with no school. But I think probably the most interesting piece of advice I've gotten in the last 6 months has really been, well, you need to give them more freedom to do what they want to do. And as a parent who grew up in the South, that's just not good parenting advice. I want to be supportive, but at the same time, be a little stern. So that's been a challenge for me.
Thank you. And then Mei D, how about you?
Yes. Hi, I'm Mei Duong. I am Director of Social Emotional Learning at the Lab School of 6 Seconds, Synapse School. So I'm calling in from Menlo Park, California. Let's see, my credentials come from having 2 kids, aside from all the other stuff I do. 2 kids who are also in transition, actually. My first one just went to high school, and it was an interesting first day of school for him, just zooming in from his room. And so it's definitely very interesting times. And my other one is 11 years old. So in terms of what a bad parenting advice, I think if it was bad, I didn't register it. You just got to go on by when there are bad advice out there. There are a lot of them, like Mei said. But I think if I have to think of one, it probably is, let your kids come into their Zoom class with PJs on. Might be one that I hear a lot, especially for younger kids. And I think that a little tough because given the uncertainty of this environment, if we don't keep to the routines and structures of the day, it's so much harder for our kids to cope. So.
I was just remembering an article that I wrote a long time ago where I think my daughter, my older child was 4 years old at the time, and we were having a lot of conflict. And I was at a dinner party, and there was a child psychologist who decided that I should have some advice, and told me, basically, well, who's the one with the power here? And, you need to, it's kind of the opposite of Gerald's advice that he's been getting. You need to take charge. And basically any piece of parenting advice that involves just do X, or it's really simple, like those pieces of parenting advice that I can just immediately say, all right, that's really unhelpful. I wanted to say hi to John and Elda. John is working backstage here in the show, and Elda had our first day of kindergarten, and we were on in a Zoom meeting last week with the staff, and over John's shoulder there was Elda having kindergarten. And I just thought, that's a perfect example of what we're facing today is, just something really different than what many of us have thought about school would be this year. And so thank you, John. And I also want to say hello to people who are saying hello on the chat. And we have people from lots of different places in the world. And glad to have you here. And I see some old friends, and I see some people who I haven't met yet here. So it's great to see people. And I noticed, where are you? Well, I noticed Rajendra dialing in from India, and there you are, Rajendra. Haven't seen you a long time. It's great to see you here again. So, what's a challenge that you're all hearing from parents right now that's maybe different than the kind of challenges that you normally hear? Mei Duong?
Well, there's so many. First off, a lot of parents are being asked to be teachers on top of their parenting role. And I think that that's presenting a lot of challenges for parents. Just because, there's a lot that goes into supporting your kids at home through their learning. And there's a lot of anxiety about how the kids are falling behind if they're not going to school in the traditional way, how they're not being able to be exposed to the various ways to interact with friends and collaborate with people and just have that social and emotional development. And just being on screen all the time is just so hard. And I think parents of younger kids, I think, are grieving this loss of innocence when it comes to technology and feeling like this is way too early for their 5-year-old to be using technology and to just be confined to these screens. I think are just some of the things that I'm hearing. And the uncertainty is definitely really compounding everything, because parenting has always been challenging because there's so many uncertainties already, but now on top of that is this pandemic and social unrest, and so it's just a lot.
I just wanted to greet a couple more people who are coming in from different places in the world and say thank you for joining us. And as you saw in the chat, if you have some thoughts about what's challenging right now, we'd love to hear that. And I think this juggling piece for a lot of parents is a very big deal. I was teaching for a university this summer, and several of my students had young children at home. And I was trying to do an emotional intelligence assessment debrief with one person, and her 3-year-old was wanting to join the conversation. And the 3-year-old had already learned that if she reached up and pulled the earbuds out of her mother's ear, she could get a lot of attention. And I think this is one of those things that we may not have had to deal with a year ago.
Yeah.
Mei, Kassem, how about you? What are you hearing from parents?
Yeah, I would definitely add to also what Mei was saying, and for sure have heard those complaints, and I've heard, there's a lot of mom guilt out there, and a lot of naturally competition actually between moms, because people with social media and how we get affected by social media and people seeing what they're posting and what they're doing with their kids at home, for example, especially with younger kids. And I've heard from a lot of moms, like, they're starting to feel really guilty and depressed and not good enough because they feel like they're not able to provide the right kind of, like you were saying, Mei, the right kind of exposure, the right kind of activities to stimulate their brain. And they hear from another friend who's saying, yeah, I'm doing this and that. And there's this, mom guilt constantly. And another actually thing that I've seen a lot, especially with the lockdown, is where, now you have the mom and the dad, or whatever, two caregivers that are actually at home, and maybe for the first time, and there's a different kind of co-parenting happening, which nobody in the household is used to. I know a lot of people where the mom was maybe doing more of the parenting and the dad was out at work, or vice versa, and now all of a sudden for months now they're actually forced to co-parent together. And I know that this has caused a lot of challenges for some people. Yes, there have been some positives, of course, coming out of that. I know some dads, for example, have said, I never knew that this was happening with my kids. But I know for a lot of couples, it's also presented a lot of challenges. So, yeah.
Well, and I know a couple people on the chat of their what's going on with their kids, and some of them are also single parents, and some of them are parents where the two parents are no longer together in the same house. And with COVID, that becomes enormously complex.
Yeah.
And then there's also the racial uprisings happening in the US. And I think for those of us with older kids, there's a lot of conversations. Maybe they're new conversations, or maybe they're conversations we've already been having. But there's an added layer of important things that are difficult to talk about. All right. Well, Gerald, what's something that hasn't changed for you?
I think when we look at the dynamics, what hasn't changed is that I'm still parenting, right? Because if you look at the current environment, one of the things that we're hearing from parents is that, well, I'm not sure what I should do. I'm not sure how much screen time I should provide. I'm not sure. And I think for me, what hasn't changed is that I'm still a parent, and I still have to set boundaries for my boys. I still have to create separation from what's school and what's home and what's work and what's social. So creating those spaces for them to go outside and play basketball, or go outside and engage in doing other things. So one of the things that haven't changed for me, Josh, is that, we've always had family time. And I think in this situation that we're in now with the pandemic, it's forced us to have more family time. And I think, I agree with Mei where, sometimes that creates more challenges. But I think what it's done is that it creates an opportunity for you to really understand the value that your kids bring to your family. But more important, it starts to help you to realize the importance of all the things you have done with your kids and how those things start to show up. So I think, being a parent for me has changed, but I think, the foundations of what I've been doing stay the same.
Yeah.
Let's talk about screens. And I see Theodora's here on chat, and Theodora's a psychologist who focuses on the use of technology and maybe the overuse. And now here we are, even having our 4-year-olds going to school on screen.
Exactly.
Somebody put in the chat, we're in the middle of a child development experiment run wild. Yeah. What are you all seeing in terms of screens and this struggle for kids and for parents?
I think some of the struggle comes from the fact that we are using the word screens for a lot of different types of screens, and that we really need to be a little bit granular about that when we're talking about screens, because there are types of screens that are they're connecting, they're connective, right? So zooming in with a grandparent and connecting that way is very supportive of kids' development and their emotional health. And then there's the types of screens that are just consumptions, right? Just one way, where they're just taking in videos from YouTube, or they're playing video games. And so that's a consumption type that we definitely want to limit as much as we can. And so so when parents get really anxious about screens, I often remind them to think about, how are they using the screens? Are the screens helping them to expand their world, or are they contracting their world? And so if we think of it that way, I think we can start to manage the screens issue a little bit more than just kind of lumping it all in one category.
So it's not just devices versus non-devices, it's what we're doing with the devices.
And Josh, I agree with Mei. I mean, one of the things that we look at, on our kids' phones and on their tablets is, how much time they're spending. But I think the other thing we really look at is where they're spending that time. And I was looking at my son's iPad the other day, and he had in a week he had about 15 hours of time where he was on calls with grandma and with aunties and with uncles and with aunts, and he was taking the initiative to reach out and really be social, right? So when I look at that to say, okay, wow, he spent 15 hours on his tablet, but I'm looking at what he's doing, that's less of a challenge for me. Where if I'm looking at it and he's spending 15 hours on YouTube. So I agree with Mei that we really have to look at what are they doing, and if we're using those tools to be social, because I think with my two sons I have very social kids, and when we transitioned from school to May and April, it was a challenge, and so they've had to find new ways to be social, and so I think we have to look at it as where are they spending the time and what's the value being added there. And then we have to manage accordingly.
Yeah, I think my 19-year-old is really struggling with that as somebody who's also very social, and just the physical distance and like just wanting to hang out with people, which is, of course, what you're supposed to be doing when you're 19. But it's like, I don't know. It just doesn't fulfill the need, being on screen somehow. And Mei Kassim, for a 4-year-old, I guess it might be a little different with his screen struggle.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we try to limit, and I think because she hasn't gotten so used to it, so it's, we have our designated screen time. But for sure, I agree with both of you, and I really like the distinction of how they're using it. My daughter she's learned everything, in these past few months. I mean, she's learned about all the apps. She's learned to message her aunt. She's learned to, send GIFs to her grandma that lives, in a different country. I don't know how she does it, and she does it by herself. So, I'm impressed on one hand. And on the other hand, I'm like, okay, I don't really want to, enable this. But I think also for parents, especially of young kids, the minute my daughter sees me pick up the phone, she wants to pick up a screen too. I see it immediately. So for sure, we have to model, obviously, that behavior and not be constantly on our phones or our laptops or our iPads or things like that. And also, again, I think this obviously applies to young kids, not teenagers, but spending time with them and figuring out ways that we can be creative, that we can do things, and I know it's tough because we do run out of ideas, of course, but just so that they know that there is an alternative to screen time to be able to do, things together. In positive discipline, we call it special time, where it's a designated scheduled time every day where we spend that time doing something that they enjoy. And it can work for teenagers, with a little bit of pushing. But yeah, I think it's really important to show kids that there is an alternative to that, stimulation that they're getting from technology.
Like going and playing baseball, right, Gerald?
Exactly.
With you, though, ideally.
With dad.
With dad, not by yourself.
We were just talking about, before we started the live stream, that another transition that comes up in many of our parenting lives is when our kids start driving. And Gerald was sharing that. And I remember that very distinctly with my younger son. When he started driving, so much changed. And a lot of it was for the good. He felt a lot more freedom, a lot less trapped in the countryside where we live. But there was also some pretty significant challenges that arose.
Yeah.
So Gerald, what's that like for you? How long has it been?
It's only been 2 months, Josh, but it's still been traumatic.
Yeah.
The difference really for me has been, the value of having that time in the car, that 3 to 5 minute drive from baseball games to home, or that 30-minute drive. The value of those conversations are critical in him becoming a young man and just him growing. And what I miss is this intimate time of just being able to have those conversations, the quiet time where we're discussing what happened or we're discussing what's important. So those 3 to 5 minutes that you go to add up each time we get in a car, that becomes significant. And now I'm missing out on that time. And so I was explaining to Josh, my son just got his license, and for the last 16 years, we've always gone to baseball together. And the last 2 times he's gone out, he's gone without me. So it's been challenging as a parent, but at the same time, I understand the value of him growing in freedom. But it's a little challenging because you get used to the dependency, or you get used to that relationship, and then you have to start to see that relationship change and that dynamic and get used to it as well.
I think you just summarized teenage parenting right there, that changing dynamic. But I hadn't thought about, in the pandemic, the car thing. A lot of parents are used to having some time with their kids, driving them to and from school. I know a lot of parents, that's not the case. But certainly if that's something that you're used to having a little transition time to talk about the day ahead or the day behind. And I wonder what can parents do in lieu of the drive to school? And by the way, I found when we were driving with our kids when they were little, I would learn so much. Yeah. And especially when we had kids in a carpool and they were talking to each other, I would learn so much about their lives because they would just talk.
Yeah.
So what's the COVID pandemic version of listening in the carpool?
Well, I've found that I've had to suggest some things, like when they come down for a snack, we'll have a seat and we'll chat for a little bit, and dinner and lunch and breakfast, because we're having all of those together. So as opposed to being in the car now, we are chatting when we're eating in the kitchen. And so I'm right here downstairs and I can hear the kitchen. So whenever I hear them downstairs, I run out there and I just get in a few words, and just a few minutes of connection, I think, is so critical. And otherwise, they're mostly in their rooms on Zoom for school, and then on Zoom for T&D, or on Zoom for just chatting with their friends and socializing. So it's important to find those moments, even if it's kind of forced initially, because it does help everybody to stay connected and to kind of break up their day a little bit too.
Mei, someone in the chat talked about time management and boundaries, and Fiorella mentions having me time, and you talked earlier about the mom guilt. And what's your advice for parents about how to balance what Mei is saying of really trying to engage whenever there's a possibility, but also having, like, I'm at work now, I'm parenting now, I'm in it in the toilet by myself. Like, how do we balance that with kids home all day?
Yeah. I mean, you just used the perfect example, Josh. I mean, I don't remember what going to the bathroom alone is like, with a 4-year-old. She doesn't get it. Like, she gets it, but she doesn't care. She's still there anyway, so it's, and you can't, I love her and she's sweet and everything, but sometimes it's like, I just need those 2 minutes, just 2 minutes. But yeah, it's a challenge. I think this is, for me personally, one of my biggest challenges of balancing, because like I mentioned earlier, besides the positive discipline work I do, I also I have my own business with my husband, who's also my co-founder. We have the fashion brand, so we work from home a lot, and it's really tough, to actually be able to have that balance and to teach a younger child that, okay, so right now I need to work on some things on my laptop, and I need that time. And honestly, I think with younger kids it's a bit tough, especially because I only have one daughter, so she doesn't have, for example, a sibling to play with, and my husband
or fight with,
exactly. Which I'm grateful for, so I don't need to spend time with that. But yeah, I think what works, I mean, we tried this for a bit and it did work when we stuck to it, is creating routines, like Mei said earlier. And in positive discipline, we do it together. So she was really excited about that, and we drew it up, and she put stickers on it and she decorated it, and we each had our own. I had one for myself, she had one for hers, her dad had one. So we had a routine for the day, and it worked fairly well. And other times was just, other suggestions that works is also what I had mentioned where, okay, so she knows that every day, for example, at 1, we have time to play together for half an hour. And that's her, something she can expect, something she can rely on. And when she sees, or when any, child sees that this time is specially for you and we're designated it, what I've realized is that, okay, she leaves me more to be able to do my own stuff because she feels, okay, so I have spent that time with you. I have given you that attention and that's fine. So now, okay, she can let me go a little bit more. The last thing I want to say also about this is that, with regards to that mom guilt, you have to also be a little bit firm sometimes, depending on how old your kids are or, but you have to express your needs. And honestly, what I tell parents all the time, if you don't express your needs, nobody's going to give them to you. Just like your own child says, this is what I need, this is what I don't need, leave me alone, play with me. I do my best in a fair, friendly, and firm way, as we say, to let them know, okay, you know what, I need this time for myself. I need to have this 1 hour and just nobody talk to me. And, I still feel guilty and I'm still thinking about what I need to do, but at least I do get that disconnect. And I think just being firm sometimes and asking for what you need can go a long way. And it models the right behavior for your kids. So, yeah.
I was just thinking more about the back to school moment that many kids and families are in. And Mei Duong and I were on a Zoom last week, I guess, with kindergarten parents just starting school. And I was thinking about how last spring, there were a lot of people talking about how hard it was that they didn't have graduations and the end of the year rituals that I think both kids like and, maybe are as much for the parents as the kids and families for the kids. But here we are in this start of school time. And I just am imagining whether your kid's going to school in person or whether you're going on Zoom, there must be a lot of big feelings people are having. And I'm wondering, what are some of those emotions that people are experiencing? John, for you, seeing Elda start kindergarten on Zoom, how did that feel? Gerald, I don't know, or you're starting, I think you said high school and middle school, or was that Mei? Mei's kids are starting high school and middle school. Online, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it was funny. I was out in the car on Saturday. My wife was out of town, so it was just me and the 2 boys. And so we were out doing guy stuff, as we put it, away from mom. And I asked my sons the question. I said, so right now we are in e-learning. So we're doing school through Zoom every day. And it's a 4-hour block every day of the week. And so I asked them, I said, so right now, I said, you have the choice to stay on Zoom, go to school 50-50, or go back full time. What would you choose? And almost at the same time, both of my kids said, stay in Zoom. And that really surprised me because they're so social. And I asked the question, why? So why would you want to do that? And they both said, well, my day is shorter, so I can get the things done I need to get done and the when I need to get it done. And I don't have to worry about being distracted by all the other things at school. And to me, that was mind-blowing, because I'm thinking, wow, they're missing school, they're missing their friends, they're missing the social interaction. And those things are important. But they said, I don't miss the distractions from all the other kids. So I think as we are going through this situation with our kids, it's really understanding what's important to them. And I think for me, where they value socialization, they value having the time to do some of the things they really enjoy doing. Because with my kids, it's school, 7:25 to 3:30. From 3:30 to 6, they're going right into sports. So they're getting home at 7. They're doing homework. We're eating dinner. It's 9 o'clock. They're going to bed, starting all over. So now being done at noon and having that noon to 3 to just relax and unwind, and then go to sports. I mean, it's created a huge dynamic for them just to be able to relax and do some of the things they enjoy doing.
Wow. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Incredible.
So as you know, Josh, Synapse started school already. So we started on August the 6th. And it was, we had planned to go hybrid, like offline and online. And then that got that got changed, and now we're all online. And for the middle school kids, the transition was so smooth. And in fact, a lot of the middle school kids really enjoy just doing class on Zoom, like Gerald said, because they're self-sufficient, right? They know how to use the technology. They have a lot more time to do their other stuff, and so they really enjoy that. For the lower school kids, like especially kindergarten through second grade, it is particularly challenging for the entire family, because parents have to be there to help the kids Zoom in, to help them figure out what the assignments are, to understand what options there are. So parents kind of have to do some prep work the night before to know which assignments to give the kid, because we're also giving a lot of choices to students and parents in terms of assignments. So, and an assignment can have 3 different paths to it. So parents have to understand which one to offer their kids. And then then they have to help their kids kind of do the assignment and then upload it. So it's difficult for families, for the younger kids. So, and I think that, it's definitely something that we're still trying to figure out. I think when we started school, parents were very concerned that their kids are not going to be able to Zoom in, but that we got figured out. And then the technology piece is pretty much figured out by now. And I think we'll eventually figure out the project-based learning piece as well. And so it's a learning curve, definitely for younger families, parents of younger families, younger kids. But yeah, there's a lot that we are learning. So a lot of this is figuring things out as we go. And parents are a bit anxious because it's so experimental, but they also understand that we're all in this together, and that with some optimism and some growth mindset about this, that eventually we'll all figure it out. And that it's really a great opportunity to be very creative in how we do school as well. And actually, as from a teacher's perspective, because I teach self-science in the middle school, there's some wonderful benefits of having kids on Zoom, and conversations can be really engaging, and everybody can jump in and not be distracted by the behaviors of the other kids and whatnot. So
I'm a little worried about the sustainability. I'm hearing a lot of teachers saying it's twice as much work to try to plan and lead classes like this. And somebody earlier said in the chat, we're seeing a lot of kind of reductivist teaching. We're essentially going to, reading, writing, arithmetic, a lot more lecture, a lot less project-based learning, a lot less social emotional learning. And so teachers who are really committed to that are having to work extra hard, and parents are having to work extra hard. And I think kids are probably having to work extra hard in some ways. And so, I think trying to do this for months, we're going to need to figure out how to renew ourselves.
And I think if I can add to this, because, also coming from the perspective of having a 4-year-old who's actually just going into kindergarten. So this is, for me and a lot of the moms that I know from this age, like Mei was saying, that it's really anxiety provoking. And I know a lot of the moms that are just worried of even getting a 4-year-old to just sit even for, a block of even 45 minutes on Zoom, where they're not watching a cartoon or something. And this is causing a lot of anger and anxiety for a lot of parents, where I've heard that they're just saying, we would rather wait till our kids can physically be in the classroom rather than do online learning. And I think, when I talk to parents also, that there's a big sense of loss. And I know, we've talked about this with high school kids about missing prom and graduations and lots of really important milestones in our lives that, they're not going to come back. And that's really, really, there's grief around that. And I think even speaking for, as a mom of a kid that's going to start school, yeah, there's definitely a sense of loss of, this is not what I envisioned, and it's not what I always had in mind. And yes, it's temporary, but it's sometimes really hard to just accept those feelings of, this is the new normal right now, and I think I know that a lot of parents that I've talked to feel the same way. And it's just, it is what it is. But I think, yeah, for younger kids, the online option is really very challenging, I have to say.
Well, and I remember distinctly the first day of kindergarten, and how proud and scared, and I'm talking about myself, like all of these really
Yes.
I want to bring up this question from Michaela about school as your own independent space. And I wonder how kids are finding that space and how parents are able to manage that. Like, okay, you're now in your own space and I'm in my own space and you do your thing because you're at school now. What's that like for you, Gerald?
It's been interesting, Josh, because my wife and I have always traditionally worked from home. And now that we're all here, it's been challenging. I think one of the things that we've done to really create space for the kids is, between hours of X and Y, everybody respects the space of the others. If my door's closed, if my door's open, you're welcome to come in or not come in. But I think the other thing is at 12 o'clock every day, we're all done. So, I think like Mei said earlier, when you hear their footsteps, everybody runs to the kitchen at noon to kind of catch up to see what's going on. What has your day been like? What are some of the things you're learning? What are some of the things you're struggling with? So I think it gives us an opportunity to have our separate rooms, but our creating space becomes for us creating time where we're all together, because I think we can get caught in the space of everybody being so separate, Josh, till we don't have the time to really create the right kind of space, right? Because we're all separate. So creating a space where we all know that we're going to be here at this time to have discussions about certain things, I think that really creates a comfortable space for my son to expect that, okay, mom and dad's going to ask me these questions, mom and dad's going to be expecting these things, so I need to be prepared. And then once we're done, then they're welcome to go back into their spaces and do some of the things they enjoy. But creating a space that we all come together, I think, is probably more critical now than it's ever been.
Similar to what Mei Duong, you talked about your family calendar and being able to see, okay, there's some distinct times for different things.
Yeah. I might also add, Josh, that there's also, so the physical space is very important, but there's also the emotional space, right? So allowing them to have the time. There are some things you don't want to ask about, right? They're socializing hours on Zoom and they're playing whatever they're playing. And, if they're at home, if you'd ask them to keep the door open, but there is something really important about, having that independence from you, and definitely developmentally appropriate as they are older. But there is something to be, I think also creating space is allowing them to drive their own schedule, right? When they're 4, then definitely you're driving it. But as they're getting older, they have to co-create that schedule, or like Gerald's kid, they're fully capable of managing their own schedule. And so that schedule ownership, I think, is critical for creating space.
I think this comment from Joanna raises this challenge of the kind of emotional boundaries that we have of being in the same house together. And figuring out how much autonomy, I think, is a really central part of parent-child dynamics.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on autonomy? It's hard.
It's hard. I mean, I think for me, we talk about autonomy. I agree with Mei that there's certain things we have to expect our kids to know to do based on the age. But I also think in this dynamic now where we're depending on, we would normally depend on the teacher to do some of those things within the scope of the classroom, I think as the parents, we have to step back and say, okay, what role do I play now? Because if the teacher's not physically present, then do I have to play a different role? And I think for me, the answer is yes, I do. So asking the questions of, hey, did you do your homework? Hey, or checking grades more consistently, where before we may have checked grades once a week, but now we're looking more critical to say, hey, did you get that turned in? Or hey, did you have a discussion with the teacher? Because if you're not physically seeing that teacher every day, there's not an opportunity to engage and have conversation or even ask questions. So I think asking about that helps me to say, okay, I need to spend some time on algebra, or I need to have my wife spend some time, with language arts or something. So I think it challenges us to be a little bit more engaged at this point to help drive success. And I hate to say drive success, but to help create success for our kids.
Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, Michaela, I am agreeing with you. Like for me, the autonomy and having my kids feel that sense of autonomy is so difficult. And I think this is a really important point, Karma, that different kids and different ages and stages, even just a couple of years difference in age, the autonomy needs and opportunities are so different.
I can also comment on that part. Always trying to bring in the early childhood experience, because I've been grateful that I have my child with me at home most of these months. She used to go to nursery or daycare before the lockdown, so she was gone actually for half of the day. But having her home now, I feel we have had an opportunity for her to grow more autonomous, within herself. Let's not talk about her attachment with me or her father, but mainly just learning a lot of skills on her own, and learning to dress herself, learning to pour herself breakfast, where before we didn't even have the time to do that. I didn't have the time to let her just do these things and take her time to learn them and to organize things and to help me with the household chores. And that I can see has really helped her, and she would have never gotten this chance had she been out somewhere else, or we wouldn't have had the lockdown. And I can see how that's really made her grow on an emotional and developmental level, where she feels like, she is part of the household, that she's not just a child living with mom and dad, but this is her home. She has her space. She does her own things in her room. She does her things in her house. And that's something that I'm happy to have had the time to allow her to actually learn those things. And that, we always say in positive discipline, like, never do something for a child that they can do themselves. And now I can actually let her do that because we have the time to do that. So that's something I'm definitely grateful for.
Mei, I'm curious about, Mei Duong, I'm curious about in the kind of interaction between parents and teachers, what advice you might have about this particular challenge as you're working with both parents and teachers.
In terms of kids' autonomy, or just in terms of everything?
Yeah, kids' autonomy and the plan and how we're going to work together and all that stuff.
Absolutely. And I think the word that comes to mind is partnership. I think before anything else is understanding that we're all on the same page to try to make every child successful to the best of our abilities in this environment. And so to understand that ultimately we want to have every kid be autonomous, because that's also the goal of parenting, right? To put ourselves out of a job so that eventually they are able to be self-sufficient and do things for themselves and be contributing members of society. And I think teachers also have the same goal. And so in the age appropriate ways, teachers and parents work together to from in kindergarten, it's a lot more communication between the parents. It's a lot of scaffolding. It's a lot of structure and there's freedom within structure, but there is structure to guide the process. And once they get a little older, it becomes, it's letting go a little bit more from the parent side and even from the teacher side by the time they get to the middle school. And the students are owning their learning process. And so the communication, if they're going to miss class, if they're going to, if they don't understand something, it's not the parents that needs to email the teacher. It's the students that needs to email and make up the lesson. And so I think we're very conscious about what is developmentally appropriate for what grade, and set those expectations accordingly to that, and build up their capacity to manage themselves exercise their executive functioning.
What I'm hearing as a theme in many of your comments, panelists, is that in this time, there's things that we might need to make more explicit. Mm-hmm. We might need to be more kind of precise about where in the old days, we said just let it flow. And now we might need to really sit down and say, okay, well, let's make sure that we have a plan about this. Let's really be on the same page about our calendar. Let's really have the conversation about who communicates with the teacher. Let's make some agreements and check in on those a lot more frequently than we might have in other times, which probably has some big benefits if we can do it.
Yeah.
And I think this point from Andy is super important about our own patterns. And I think the point that one of the points I really wanted to bring up in today's conversation is that when we are in times of change, we also need to change.
Yeah, definitely.
And our patterns of how we did things or how we learned things or what's comfortable for us, it might not be comfortable. And as Dula says, the comfort zone is disrupted. And that means we all need to be saying, okay, well, let's take a pause and recalibrate. Mm-hmm. Well, we're getting near the end of our time. And so I would like to lend you, Annabelle Jensen, the president of 6 Seconds, has a magic wand. And I would like to lend you her magic wand and ask you if you could make a wish for parents in these COVID times. What's the skill that you think would really be helpful, or the wish that you would give to them? What's the wish you would make for parents in this time that we're in? Who wants to go first? Whoops, we lost Gerald there. So not Gerald. Hey, Kasim, you want to go first?
Sure. Well, I think, there's 2 skills that I would maybe talk about. One that's more related maybe to us as parents or as an individual, and that would be to practice mindfulness. And I think, I'm sure all of us have at least heard the word mindfulness, and I'm a big fan of it. It's, I think, mindfulness has the capacity to really change the world. And if we're able to practice even just some very, very simple concepts and techniques of, seeing that, just this is what's happening, this is where I'm at, not completely engaging on an emotional level with what's going on day to day, just accepting it, learning gratitude, compassion, and just really just being there with what's happening day to day. That really goes a long way. And I think that also models a lot for our kids. And it can help us in this transition where we have, anxiety and depression and anger and all of these kinds of feelings. The one other tool I would say that I would really give to parents is what we've talked a lot about it today, all of us. What we formalize it in positive discipline, and we call it family meetings, where it's a weekly meeting, we can call it meeting that we have as a family that everybody knows. We choose a day and a time. And this is where we talk about all the things that anyone needs to bring up. There's an agenda, and we talk about what things that might have come up for us in the week, what problems we need to solve. If someone did something to bother me, we talk about it. We try to find solutions. And we also do a lot of compliments and appreciations in these meetings. And this is an amazing and powerful tool that all parents should use, actually, even by starting small. And I think, like you guys said, that sometimes in the beginning, it's going to be a little forced. They're going to be a little bit resistant. But at the end of the day, it has shown to really keep the family connected and to really teach a lot of problem solving and a lot of emotional intelligence using these kinds of tools. So that's what I would tell parents.
Yeah, when mine were littler, we had a lot of family meetings on Sunday evenings and planning the week and prioritizing, and sometimes some laughter and sometimes some tears. But Gerald, how about you? What are you going to use the magic wand for?
I think the easy answer, Josh, would be I would wave my magic wand for parenting and just increase emotional intelligence, right? because I think for me, in my journey over the last few years, the biggest dynamic that has changed for me has been learning the importance of managing emotions, right? Because when I can manage my emotions and help my kids manage their emotions, it creates this dynamic in the household where things get so much simpler, right? Because we can communicate effectively, we can respect how the other person is feeling, we can be empathetic towards the other person, because it's this symbiotic relationship that starts to happen. So I think one would really be, how do we continue to talk about emotional intelligence? How do we continue to teach parents the value of it? Because I think once everyone gets it, the value itself is exponential, right? And I think that the second thing that I would do is make sure that parents are still taking time for themselves, Josh. Because I think in this dynamic, we're so focused on our kids and our kids' well-being and what can we do for our kids and how we help our kids and what we do for our kids and how we help our kids be successful. And I think what's lost in this transition is that we still have to be parents. And in being parents, there's a point of taking time for self. There's a point of taking time to do date night. There's a point of, taking time to be social for yourself. Because I think for us as adults, we have to make sure that we're recharging and refueling every day and every week so that we can show up and be the best parents for our kids. So those two things for me is important. Kids first, but close to kids first is parents first. And we have to balance those two to make sure that we're being recharged to give our kids what they need.
Well, and I think if we had, a couple of months of shelter in place and grappling with pandemic uncertainty, we could just kind of tough that out. And now I think what we're seeing is this is a marathon.
Yeah.
And so we're going to need to support our kids and ourselves and our teachers and our grandmas and anybody else to find equilibrium. I'm not a fan of new normal, but to find equilibrium, to balance the surfboard on these waves. And Mei Duong, how about you?
Yeah, the magic wand. Gosh, wouldn't it be great? We all have that.
Yeah, your wish is that everybody gets a magic wand.
Yes. So great. Gosh, if I had a magic wand, I would wish for every parent to believe that you actually have the answers within yourselves, and that there are a lot of parenting advice out there, but you could actually develop whiplash, right? If you're just following all the advice out there. Your kids the best. Your family goals. Your family culture, and what you want to get out of your developing your kids. And so I would say that dig deep and allow those emotions to come up and really navigate them, create space for yourself, create space for your kids to talk about those feelings. And really, if you need to change your relationship with uncertainty, that would be a very productive thing to do, because I think that we're in this for the long haul. And that there is no answer that anybody has. No experts has an answer right now. And so believing that, or just embracing the power of maybe, right? Maybe the air quality will be much better tomorrow and you'll go for a walk. Maybe we can go back to school in person. Maybe. There's no answer. So just that relationship, not being attached to any particular outcome, I think the Buddha says is the key to happiness, is to just embrace the uncertainty. And then the other thing is really to find purpose in the chaos. We know from a lot of research that when there's purpose, we can find happiness and we can find meaning, even in this chaotic circumstance. And so for young kids, even young kids can find purpose. And it could be something as simple as being a contributing member of the family. And what is that overarching purpose from which they can hang all their actions every day. And older kids, like middle school kids, really love being asked about their purpose, and just really pushing them to think bigger. What does the world need? And I think that they will find that that's an anchor for them through these times. So.
Well, I have the Sustainable Development Goals here in hand, and an amazing conversation to be talking about kids at really any age. Like, which one of these things do you care about? And some of you are aware of the pop-up festival that's starting now in a partnership with UNICEF for World Children's Day, and we have kids and families and educators all over the world starting to dig in and figure out how we're going to do it this year. And we have a new set of activities called the Green 13 pop-up kit. And in 2 weeks on the live stream, we'll be having a live stream about this. And so we hope to see you all there. Next week's live stream is about how do we practice emotional intelligence? What do we actually do to make emotional intelligence more part of our days? And my concluding thought for today is actually the same thing that I wrote a long time ago in my parenting book, which is this is a time for learning. And this is a time where we have to. And so I think there's something really good about that. Like, as both Mei said, in this state of uncertainty, we're kind of finding our way. And Gerald talked about this as well, of like figuring it out. That's part of the journey, and we've got to do it even more now. And so we just lean into that. We're here in a space of learning as parents, and we're here in a space of learning with our kids. And what a gift to our children to role model for them, being somebody who goes into this kind of chaos and uncertainty and crisis and says, I'm going to be here with you, and we're going to learn together. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, panelists. Thank you for all the interaction in the chat. And those of you who are watching the recording, please ask questions and comment below the video. There's a place to comment, and we love answering questions there. So panelists, thank you for being here, and good luck with your parenting adventures. And Tom, back to you.
Well, what a conversation. I don't have kids myself. The closest thing I can think of, I have a dog, and I think during this pandemic, he doesn't get screen time, really. Just a little bit when I watch TV, he just sits there and watches TV with us sometimes. But what an amazing conversation. I think there is a lot to learn even for people that actually don't have kids, because it's a challenging time, and a lot of learning is needed for any kinds of relationship, really, not just parenting. But I think there is a lot of wisdom that I got today from, taking time for yourself, your needs, and really managing, even work and life. There is a lot of when big changes like this happen. I think there is a lot of learning to be done and a lot of flexibility. New patterns have to be created. We don't really know. Nobody knows, as Mei was saying. And so it's really, wisdom lives within. One of our 6 seconds learning philosophy principles really comes into play, because you have to listen to yourself first. And so I found the conversation really useful. And so to all of you watching, as Joshua was saying, feel free to drop a comment below the video so we can get back to you, and give us ideas on new topics that you want us to talk about. And don't forget, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. And one last reminder, if this is new to you, if EQ is new to you, we have Welcome to EQ every week, several times a week, actually. So make sure to check out events.6seconds.org and type in welcome on the search. You'll find many options in different time zones. Lovely to see you. See you next week.
If this was helpful, would you please comment, like, share, and subscribe? The Emotional Intelligence Network is your community to grow and practice EQ. At 6 seconds, that means being smarter with feelings. And we're here to provide practical, proven EQ tools so workplaces, schools, and people can thrive everywhere in the world. Be sure to visit 6seconds.org to find the complete suite of resources, assessments, and programs. Thank you for watching.